I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, who is Scott Bell. Scott is the Deputy Director of Procurement Development and Construction Reform Division at the Scottish Government. This division is responsible for delivering the e-commerce shared service, procurement supplier journeys, construction procurement and commercial policy, and coordinating development activity across the public procurement landscape in Scotland. Scott has also recently joined the SDP board and plays a proactive role in connecting and sharing Scottish Government guidance and support to the programme. Now I'd like to welcome Scott.
Thanks, Gillian. Can folks hear okay at the back? Is it? It's okay. There was no response, so I'm presuming that was it. Yeah.
I put them on to sleep.
Yeah, I'm Scott Bell. I'm Deputy Director of Procurement in the Procurement Commercial Directorate at Scottish Government. I've been pretty active in terms of as an advisor type role for the Supplier Development Programme for quite a number of years now, and recently in kind of trying to reshape some of the governance, boring stuff I know, around SDP. Scottish Government took on a board member position there. And really what we're looking to do through that is to extend the influence of the Supplier Development Programme right across Scotland. This isn't just about local authorities, although they are obviously a key part in terms of any local economic growth that we would expect. But it's also about the other public sector bodies that we would look to take along with us on that journey. And also the business-to-business relationships that can happen through events like this as well. So we're keen to promote all of that activity. It's fantastic to see so many people here. Gillian told me that there had been something upwards of 700 registrations for this event, at which I gulped because I was thinking about this location, and actually there's something in that, isn't it? That this is the first time we've had a Meet the Buyer North. We've got 700 or 800 people registered to turn up. Where do we fit them? And how do we actually address that going forward? What's the best way? So let's talk. Let's figure out the best way to make sure we do get the right type of engagement that suits you guys. Because at the end of the day, this is all about small, medium-sized, micro, local businesses and how you interact with the public sector. So I'm looking forward to more engagement through the day as we go through that. Now, please forgive me. I'm going to, for 2 slides, sound like a typical civil servant. But after that, I'm hoping that will connect, maybe give you a framework that allows you to connect to actually why we want more businesses in Scotland competing and winning public contracts. So, typical civil servant, he starts talking about acts of parliament and things like that. But there are 3 key pieces of legislation that have come in over the recent years. In 2010, there was the Fairer Scotland duty. In 2014, the Procurement Reform Act, and in 2015, the Communities Empowerment Act, which is all really interesting, I assure you. But what they do is lay the foundation for how we seek public sector to support the type of country we want to operate in. So things like the Procurement Reform Act put a duty on every public body to be considering the social, economic and environmental well-being of its area before it even starts doing a procurement. That is when we need to engage early in some of those key points. I was talking to a gentleman down here about that early engagement and how we connect earlier in lots of different areas, whether we're putting up buildings, doing work in school grounds, or even catering contracts, or whatever the social care services that we're putting together. That early engagement is important. And it's implicit within public bodies that they should be considering that social, economic and environmental well-being. And the Communities Empowerment Act also says that the power rests with communities. And there's been a lot of ceding of power as we go through this. Who's making those local decisions as to what it is that we should do? How do we solve some of the local issues that we face in Scotland? Well, who better than actually people there, rather than corporate bodies in this public sector world that kind of float around. This should be the final really interesting slide for you. The National performance framework really describes the sort of Scotland we are trying to create. It talks about us being connected and entrepreneurial, competitive, inclusive, sustainable and open. That type of Scotland does not come from closed doors and from public bodies only engaging with businesses through very hard structured processes and etc. Some of those things exist for good reason, and actually they avoid a huge amount of fraud and other bad practice that we know can happen. However, preceding all of that, we need to be connected, entrepreneurial, engaged, etc. And it also describes a Scotland where we have communities that are inclusive and empowered, and that where innovative businesses offer fair work. So it's not just about those contracts, it's about how we enter into that contract that says, yes, you're providing this, and yes, there are fair work elements that sit behind that. And SMEs are often the place where fair work shines the most and is heard the least, because you are usually very connected into local communities and understand the value that your people bring to your own organisations. So it's really on that basis, if I can translate that to an event like today, this is an opportunity for the public sector and private sector to meet. It's here in the north, in Inverness. You can talk about some of the local issues. We've got a number of sort of very local projects and things like that to talk about today, and it's how they apply and take shape for you. And I'd encourage, if there's any buyers in the room, this is not an opportunity of, I need X, what are you selling? And if you are a potential supplier in the room, it's not a case of, what are you buying? I can do this for you. It's actually about the chance to have conversations. What lies behind that need? What are the issues that are sitting there? How can we work together and engage to solve some of these problems? You know, how are we going to deliver social care to some of the most remotest areas of Scotland without actually some sensible conversations early on about how we do that? So it's an opportunity for lots of engaging conversations, whether that be between the public sector and the private sector, or whether that be between private and private companies, or even public and public. You were talking about your stand, Business Gateway and Murray Council, together in that. Where are the others? There's another stand that you'll see that we've got, I think, Highland, Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire in the same place. How do we connect across that public sector landscape? Another thing I'll just mention in there was a recent report just published that's talked about a reduction in the local spend of Scotland's councils, which is very, factually, that is correct, using the definition of local that was used within there. And it's fine to do that study. It's actually quite a powerful study. But local would say, I'll keep it local. Local would say, if you're not in Murray and you've not supplied Murray Council, it doesn't count. So a supplier from Elgin providing a service to the local, the Highland Council based in Inverness doesn't count as local. Now, I was really pleased that I saw Angus up on the list, because I've always wondered where Angus rests, because I'm from there, and I always didn't feel part of the Central Belt, so thank you for that. But I don't think, as businesses, you necessarily see the world as like having a line between Elgin and Inverness. You'll go to Inverness to sell. That's worth it. So there is something within that definition as well, that actually we need to be thinking about the local environment and the local economic impact of some of those. So that's something. The other thing I'll talk to you about is, after this event, I'm sure you've done it all before, after this event, go and have a look at some of the procurement strategies and annual reports for the local authorities and public bodies you're interested in doing business with. That'll tell you how they plan to engage in a local area, in a local context. And if you think that's wrong, go challenge. These are public statements in terms of strategy. Your citizens, you have the opportunity to engage with those public bodies in some of those. And that will outline some of the key projects that they're maybe seeing, how they plan to engage in some of those. And it's important that you are part of that dialogue. This isn't just about the public sector coming along and saying, I need X. Thank you, give me it. It's actually about the dialogue that goes on to say, what's X doing? X is resolving this problem. How can I find you ways of resolving that problem? That's a far better place to be in terms of that sort of level of engagement. And the other thing to think about, and it kind of leads on from that, if there is space for your business to contribute beyond just responding to tenders and quotes, and think about how your business actually is rooted within your community, how you can do that as well, and that connection that potentially plays through, because there's value in those conversations. And it's great to see larger organisations coming along to events like this to actually think about how they connect into the local community as well. I think that's an important message. It's not just, I'm going to go way back, Michael Dell, I think it was, the Dell Computers from years ago, said it's not companies that compete, it's supply chains. And actually, if you've got that supply chain rooted locally, then you can do something powerful. So the types of opportunities, this is getting to stuff that matters. The types of opportunities that I think you might have more conversations about today. In the digital and telephony space from Scottish Government, we've got a couple of, we call them they're technically dynamic purchasing systems. I've got a couple of colleagues here today, Suzanne and Lee, who'd be happy to talk to you about that. But that makes it much easier and quicker for businesses operating in digital and telephony space to engage in public sector contracts. You don't need to do a tender anymore. You can, in terms of like the big tender for work to get on the framework, you can actually complete a European single procurement document. And if you meet a certain number of criteria, you're on that dynamic purchasing system and you can get access to the opportunities that exist. There are already 13 suppliers based in the north of Scotland on those two dynamic purchasing systems. So there's a lower barrier to entry to be able to get into some of those things. And that's a very conscious decision we've taken to try to make it easier for smaller local businesses to get onto some of these frameworks that would have been seen as, just don't go there. This is for the IBMs of this world, it's not for me. Well, actually, it is for you, and that's why we're taking that type of approach. We've got Transport Scotland here today. I'm sure that'll be a really interesting conversation from Pat Purcell later in terms of the A9. Now, that's probably got 2 or 3 levels of interest to you, whether that be I could do some groundwork there, or, wouldn't it just be great to have that dualed all the way down to Perth? That would be fantastic. So I think other opportunities coming there in terms of the A9 dualling, and obviously there are other broader, longer term transport opportunities coming as well, but I think Pat is going to focus on A9 dualling. Also in Highlands and Islands Enterprise, I think Ian Constantine and some colleagues are here today. And what an exciting opportunity exists in Sutherland in terms of spaceport. And that's not just about rocket launchers. There's a whole level of support comes together within there in terms of how we're going to support that in the area. So again, a number of opportunities potentially there in all sorts of businesses to connect, and I'd suggest you connect in with Highlands and Islands on that basis as well. And also we've got Dounreay here today in turn, and thinking there about the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. Now, obviously a lot of that decommissioning work has already been completed at Dounreay, but what about taking that expertise and exporting it? What about actually, say, taking that down to other areas where there is nuclear decommissioning? And we've asked the NDA to add nuclear decommissioning as a project in the Public Contracts Scotland website to try and make it easier for people to see the opportunities that might come from that. So something else then that we're trying to take forward in there. So these are the big ticket items that we see from a kind of central government space taking forward here. There are many others, and there are a number of evolving as you look at things like the Inverness sort of in City Deal type space and Murray. RAF Lossiemouth and Murray in terms of how that area is getting taken as well. 400 million. So lots of opportunities there. This is, you'll hear, if you've not heard of Public Contract Scotland before today, you will go away and you'll be dreaming about it tonight. You'll be tossing and turning and you won't get it out of your head, because I think everybody is probably going to try and tell you about Public Contract Scotland. Well, my team provide it, and that's all I need to say about it. It does what it does. I think it's actually now required. All public bodies need to advertise the requirements on here. So if there is a one-stop shop of what's required, here it is. You can't make it any more one-stop shop than one place where everything is advertised. And we've put that in law, so it's there. And if you're interested in Public Contract Scotland, we've got Barry DL, who's here today as well, who can talk about a number of tendering type tools that exist surrounding that. There's also the supplier journey. We, for a number of years, have used the procurement journey in the public sector, and we had a supplier journey, and it wasn't that great. So we went out and we listened to 2,500 suppliers. What could we do better with that website? And we've now created a supplier journey which should provide an easy way for you to disentangle the gobbledygook that procurement and public sector can put around just striking a deal. So hopefully that helps map that process out for you, gives you some sense as to what it all means, and maybe gives you some of the language associated with it. And it's not, we don't just give the support in terms of this type of work before bidding for contracts. We also have other support once you've been awarded a contract. Stephen, a colleague, is here today, and he can talk to you about how do you present your product range more readily and easily to public sector buyers. We've got a tool to do that. It's web-based, we can make that easier. How do you get your invoices processed? We've got a tool to do that. We can let you do e-invoicing. Most accounting systems can create e-invoices now, fairly straightforward. Even the most basic ones can create an electronic PDF. Well, we can take that. That means it sounds simple, does it? You don't need to post your invoices anymore. Great, that's saving me. What is the price of a stamp now? 64p? I don't know, I've forgotten. But you can do away with that, and you can invoice electronically. So we offer that sort of capability as well, as long as public sector bodies are using it. And I would welcome your pressure on public sector bodies to use that. And in fact, we have got a consultation out just now around e-invoicing to look to actually make it a requirement that should suppliers wish to use electronic invoicing, then public sector bodies must accept them. That is something that we're looking to put through Parliament in this session. So quite a lot of things we're going to do in those spaces to provide support to you to be able to do business with us, because we do know that we can be a bit difficult at times. We don't want to be. It's often because there's just layers of things that we need to do, and I'm sure actually if you step back from it and think, yeah, I don't just want a particular public sector body giving the business to a mate of the local politicians. I want openness and transparency in that process. That's what all the process is about, is that openness and transparency and control in those. So, but we don't, this is Scottish Government-wide type areas now. Other areas of support that we're providing that's focused on SMEs. I don't know if you've come across, I take it these slides are going to be available to everybody. That's good, because I left the web URLs up at the top. There's the mygov.scot website. It's got a whole load of information in there in terms of support that you might find useful for your business at various times, depending on what you're doing. And I encourage you to connect with that as well. And moving into business economic development support, if you're looking at ways of funding your business, finding ways to do new things, there are a number of sources of funding that we make available as well. Those are often signposted through things like Business Gateway, through Highland Island Enterprise, etc., and depending on where your business is from, obviously as well, Scottish Enterprise. But a couple in there I would just mention specifically the Building Scotland Fund. That's not targeted at SMEs, but it is certainly open to SMEs. And it's a £150 million fund that intends to invest £70 million next financial year, so 2018-19, and 80 million years over the following two. And it's for loan or equity support in order for creating infrastructure, creating buildings, etc. So if you're looking at expanding your physical footprint, that may be something that you might consider looking at. We're working with Scottish Enterprise, Hyde, Scottish Funding Council and the Futures Trust in terms of how we actually, or not how we, but in the delivery of that. And the other one that you might want to also be thinking about is the Scottish Growth Scheme. We want to see a much broader growth of SMEs and getting the investment that they need to be able to grow. And so the growth scheme is a plan to address market failure. We're targeting SMEs who have got growth and export potential. Whether that be in the area of, maybe being technology intensive or looking to actually export into new markets or in a pre-revenue stage. So actually, it's an idea. You're in that kind of innovation space. There might be ways in which you can get funding from that. So there's a number of things that we do in terms of support. And in the final support space, there's also cyber resilience. And this isn't, don't worry, I'm not an expert in this, so I can't bore you about it. But we do know that cyber attacks on supply chains and supply chain information are a key risk to many areas of the public sector. And so we are, you'll see here the cyber resilience space, we are recognising that we need to put resilience in place to assist in that supply chain. Now that's fine when you're maybe dealing with the big boys who've got IT teams. But if you're the MD and the HR manager and the IT expert and the sales director, you ain't going to be able to be on top of some of that. So we're going to be looking at what type of advice we can put out there for you, and on that basis there's going to be an action plan on cyber resilience that will look at different layers of the supply chain. Now, that all sounds a bit meh. But imagine you're a small local provider of social care and you've got somebody's details on your laptop, maybe some very personal details. They are at risk if you don't have the right controls. And I wouldn't want my parents' information getting into the wrong hands. And I'm sure you wouldn't want yours either. So this isn't just about, what they call themselves, the Great Bears or whatever it was that put out stuff about sports people and all of that. It actually can hit right home to some of the most, some of the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable. Thank you very much. We get there in the end. Vulnerable people in our society. So it is important that we take care of that, and we are putting things in there to try and help on that basis. So I hope that's been useful. I've kind of gone through the procurement space and what we're doing around there and other areas that can pinpoint you. But today, there are literally hundreds of leads here today. It may be some of the people who are in the stands outside. It may not. Those people may not be the people who are making the decisions in terms of sourcing. But they give you ins and they give you ways to be thinking about how you deal with those people. But there are potentially another 700 or 800 leads there's maybe another 120, he says, guessing, for this room, because each of you potentially could be, springing a conversation here today that leads somewhere else for you and creates revenue later, because that's what it's about. Some of these leads might be warmer than others. Some might be in areas you weren't expecting. But try and use this, please, as a networking opportunity, not just for the 30 odd organisations that we've got out there, but also between yourselves. I hope you found this useful. And I would simply close by wishing you good business today. Somewhere in this room today is a lead that's going to get you revenue that you wouldn't have got otherwise for somebody. I would wish it on all of you, but that's maybe pushing it. But I do hope that you get good business out of today, and thank you for your time.